Welcome to this explainer. If you've been scrolling through business news lately, you've probably seen some incredibly flashy retail tech headlines that honestly just seem to defy logic. We're talking companies reporting explosive multi-100% revenue growth literally overnight, seemingly out of nowhere. But as focused learners, we know that headlines rarely tell the whole story. Today, we're going to decode the structural reality behind these numbers. We're looking at the intense battle in India's quick commerce sector, specifically Blinkit versus Swiggy Instamart, and we're uncovering the financial engineering that separates the winners from the rest. Just look at this number, 196.5%. That is a staggering year-over-year revenue jump reported by Zomato, Blinkit's parent company, for their fourth quarter of fiscal year 2026. Their consolidated revenue hit a massive 17,292 crore rupees. And it wasn't just some empty top-line growth either. Their net profit actually surged an astounding 346% to 174 crore. On paper, it absolutely looks like a miracle of modern retail. Okay, let's dive into this. Did Zomato and Blinkit actually sell 3 times more food and groceries overnight? Well, the short answer is no. While their underlying growth is genuinely impressive, it's around 64% on a like-for-like basis. That wild 196% headline figure is actually a fascinating detective story. It's the result of a massive structural and accounting shift that artificially inflated the top line. Section 1. The accounting magic trick. So the core mechanism driving these wild numbers is the Indian Accounting Standard 115, and specifically the rules around principal versus agent. Under this standard, you have to figure out who actually controls the inventory. If an e-commerce platform acts as a principal, meaning they buy, own, and control the inventory before it ever reaches the customer, they get to report the entire gross value of the sale as their revenue. But if they're just an agent, meaning they simply facilitate a sale for a third-party seller, they're only allowed to report the small net commission they charge. And this brilliantly illustrates the whole gross versus net concept. Think of the agent model kind of like a real estate agent, right? They facilitate the sale of a $500,000 house, but their revenue is really just their 3% cut, about $15,000. Now, think of the principal model like a house flipper. They buy the house, take on all the risk, and sell it for $500,000, so they get to report the full $500,000 as their revenue. This exact shift from agent to principal is exactly what caused Blinkit's revenue to just explode mathematically. Section 2. Unlocking the inventory advantage. Now, how did Blinkit actually pull this off? Well, Eternal Limited, Zomato's parent company, expertly navigated India's strict foreign investment regulations. Back in May 2025, they deliberately capped their foreign ownership at 49.5%. This was a highly strategic move because it allowed them to qualify as an Indian-owned and controlled company, or an IOCC. Once they snagged that IOCC status, they were legally allowed to own inventory. Fast forward to September 2025, and Blinkit had completely transitioned from a pure marketplace to taking full, direct ownership of their dark store inventory. And let me tell you, this wasn't just some clever accounting trick. It unlocked massive operational benefits. By owning the inventory, Blinkit can now procure directly from brands, negotiate bulk discounts, and even launch their own high-margin private label products. It also completely simplified compliance, like GST and food safety licenses, for their partner brands. And the absolute best part? Because quick commerce moves at breakneck speed, funding this inventory requires less than 1,000 crore rupees, which is just about 15 days of working capital. It is an incredibly efficient use of cash that gives them total control over their supply chain. Section 3. Swiggy's regulatory roadblock. Let's move to Swiggy and see how this builds. Seeing Blinkit's massive success, Swiggy desperately wanted to adopt the exact same playbook for Instamart. In April and May of 2026, they initiated a remote e-voting process. The goal here was to amend their articles of association, reduce their foreign influence, snag that coveted IOC status, and ultimately transition Instamart to an identical, inventory-led model. But here is the huge plot twist. The attempt completely failed. Swiggy just could not secure the required shareholder approval to alter their corporate governance. So the regulatory roadblock held firm, and it completely derailed their planned inventory transition. The consequences of this failure are honestly devastating for Swiggy Instamart. Because they lack that IOC status, they are legally barred from owning inventory. They can't buy in bulk directly from brands to get better margins. And third-party sellers, they still have to navigate the absolute operational nightmare of registering Swiggy's individual dark stores under their own tax licenses independently. So Instamart is effectively trapped in the legacy agent marketplace model, while their biggest rival is out there playing by the much more lucrative principal rules. Section 4. Blinkit versus Instamart, the real scoreboard. Now, what's really interesting about this is that comparing their headline revenues right now is basically an apples to oranges accounting trick. What we really need to look at is how structural control translates to actual market dominance. Blinkit's highly optimized inventory-led supply chain has helped them capture a commanding 45% share of India's quick commerce market. Meanwhile, Swiggy Instamart, constantly battling operational friction, is trailing significantly at just 27%. When we contrast the scale using Q4 FY26 metrics, the gap becomes even clearer. We have to look at gross order value, or GOV, which measures the total value of goods sold completely regardless of the accounting model. Blinkit processed over 14,300 crore rupees in GOV across 2,243 dark stores, which was driven by a significantly higher number of daily orders. Instamart, on the other hand, processed about 7,800 crore across 1,143 stores with lower order velocity. So operationally speaking, Blinkit is practically double the size of Instamart right now. And that massive scale, it definitely shows up in the bottom line. Because Blinkit controls its inventory, it now generates a positive contribution margin on literally every order, pushing them to a huge milestone, a positive adjusted EBITDA of 37 crore rupees. Meanwhile, Instamart, which is struggling with negative contribution margins and the everyday friction of the marketplace model, posted a staggering loss of 858 crore. The contrast absolutely could not be starker. Section 5, the new valuation game. Because these platforms are morphing from software agents into physical retail principles, the old tech valuation playbook is completely dead. Step 1, we have to discard those EV to revenue multiples. Think about it. If a company shifts from agent to principal, their revenue spikes artificially, making the multiple look cheap even if the actual business hasn't improved one bit. Instead, we have to use physical retail metrics. We track inventory turns, basically how fast goods move off the shelves. We measure return on capital employed, because building out dark stores and buying up inventory is incredibly capital intensive. And finally, we absolutely must assess dark store productivity. Here is a perfect example of this new math. 16,391 rupees, that is Swiggy Instamart's Q4 FY26 gross order value generated per square foot of their dark store real estate. This is exactly how you measure asset efficiency in the new quick commerce landscape. You have to treat these companies like hyper-optimized physical supermarkets, not just software apps. So the crucial point here is this. When you're analyzing this sector, headline revenue growth can often be a sheer accounting illusion, driven by that shift from agent to principal. The true value and the real path to profitability lies in supply chain dominance and direct inventory control, which Blinkit has masterfully achieved. Going forward, the single most important thing to watch is Swiggy's next move to try and break through their regulatory roadblock. Which leaves us with this final provocative thought to ponder. If Swiggy eventually manages to secure that shareholder approval, change their governance, and get that IOCC status, they will definitely adopt the principal model. And yeah, their reported revenue will mathematically triple overnight. But don't let the headlines fool you. Will an accounting fix actually solve their operational deficit and help them catch up to Blinkit on the ground? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep learning